Hello everyone, welcome to Friday Live with Ashani. This is our episode 4 actually. We've been talking about Australian skilled migration for the past 3 weeks on a Friday, 3 o'clock Australian time, Brisbane time. The first week we talked about the points table, what the visa types, what skilled migration visas and what are the types available for people who are interested in coming to Australia for skilled migration. And the second week we looked at our points table and also what we have to do to lodge an EOI. So the visa types available are subclass 189, 190, 491, and you need at least 65 points to lodge an EOI. The EOIs are lodged through a system called Skill Select, and once you're selected, then only you can lodge a visa application for these visa types. Then last week we talked about another very important topic. If you're interested in skill migration, that's the skills assessment. So once you figure out what your occupation is, then you need to go and get a skill assessment from the relevant authority to say that your qualification and work experience are suited to Australian in the same position. So that's where we are. Before we start today, it's been a crazy few weeks for anyone who's interested in Australian migration. I'm pretty sure you have seen the press release by the Minister of Home Affairs, what's going to happen. So there is a lot we are expecting in this few months. I think leading up to July there'll be a lot of changes, and even after July there'll be many more changes coming, especially for skilled migration and also for work visas. So when you talk about work visa, I'll just quickly go through it because everyone's talking about it. It's big news. I'm sure you're all interested in it as well. So I'll just quickly run through it before we actually get into our today's topic, which is migrating into Queensland. What do you need to do? Right, so TISMIT. What is TISMIT? TISMIT is the threshold, migration income threshold, skilled migration income threshold. This is only right now applicable to subclass 482. They say you need to be earning minimum $53,900 if you want to get subclass 482, which is the employee nominated visa. Again, nothing to do with skilled migration. This is for employee nominated visa. This amount is now going to go up to $70,000 as of 1st of July. So if someone's lodging this visa from 1st of July, their minimum has to be at least $70,000 plus tax and super. The TISMIT also actually plays a role in subclass 491 SBO stream, because if you get an invitation and if you get a visa in subclass 491, then you get a visa for 5 years. And 3 years of that visa, you need to make an income, which is the minimum income or the TISMIT, which is $53,900. So we are hoping if this one goes up, the amount that people needs to earn on a subclass 491 leading up to subclass 191, which is the permanent residency, could also go up to $70,000. That's one big news. And also there are a few other news that came available to us. The next one is the New Zealand pathway for citizenship. So there are many New Zealand residents living in Australia, about 350,000 at the moment, and these people had to go through a different pathway to get permanent residency before they could be eligible for Australian citizenship. Now these people are eligible for Australian citizenship. Again, really big news for a cohort of people who are already in Australia. The second or the third big news is the Honourable Minister has promised or has mentioned or indicated that by the end of this year, all the people who are on a temporary skilled work visa will have a pathway towards permanent residency. Again, great news. You know, the things that she mentioned, if these things do happen in this year, we are expecting big changes and also really good changes for people who are expecting permanent residency. And she's also talking about scrapping the point system that we talked about a few weeks ago, so that could be gone by the end of this year. And she's also talking about getting rid of the skills list. So as you know, there are many skills lists now, medium to long term list, short term list, ROL, there's Dharma list, there are different lists for different states. So from what she's saying, these lists are outdated because there are some occupations that are not in these lists because the lists were created years ago, 10 years ago or more. So she's talking about either coming up with new lists or having a dynamic list that changes with the requirements of the economy or the requirements of today's different employment sectors. So these are big, good changes, but changes that we are keeping our eyes open for, and as soon as we hear it, we will let you know and how this will affect you. All right, Queensland. Let's shift our focus to Queensland. Now we talked about different visas available and what can you do to be eligible. Now you have a skills assessment, now you have English. What's next? So if you're interested in getting an invitation from Queensland state government, these are the visa types available to you. I've actually written them down as well. First one, subclass 190, then subclass 491, and then subclass 491, small business owner pathway. Queensland is one of the first states to open this pathway, and we have had many applicants who's going through that pathway as well. Subclass 491 SPO, again great pathway. You only need 65 points including the state points, so on your own you only need 50 points to be eligible for this pathway. So what I will do, I will explain each of these categories under the pathways that Queensland offers. Queensland have few different pathways to get a 190 or 491 and different requirements. I also want you to understand that before we look at the state, you need to first realize that you have to fulfill the requirements in the first instance, the federal list. So federal government has a requirement list, which is the points table. You need to meet certain points and you need to be at a certain age, have certain English. Then you look at the state requirement. And right now, Queensland state has a pathway for Queensland Graduate. So if you studied in a Queensland university for at least 2 years and lived in Queensland, you have a different pathway to get subclass 190 and 491. One of the benefits of this is like a great benefit is for PhD holders. So if you completed a PhD in Queensland within the last 2 years, then you don't even need a job. So every other graduate or every other person who's applying through Queensland either needs to have a job or to operate a business. But if you're a PhD holder, you are exempt from that requirement. So the first one, as I mentioned, is the Queensland Graduate. Then the second one is if you're a skilled worker living and working in Queensland. The third one is if you're offshore. And the fourth one is if you're a small business owner. So let's just go to the first point. So if you're a Queensland graduate, as I mentioned, if you're a PhD or a doctorate graduate, then you need to be living in Queensland onshore. You need to have completed 100% of your PhD in Queensland, and you need to pass that, and you need to have completed that in the last 2 years, and you need to have nominated an occupation from the occupation list, which is the medium to long term list, short term list, and ROL combined. So it could be any occupation from any of those three lists, and you do not need a job. So that's for a PhD graduate. If you're a master's graduate for subclass 190, you need to have graduated again from Queensland all 2 years, and you need to have graduated from a STEM qualification, and then you need to be employed full-time at least 35 hours a week in a STEM occupation. So then you will be eligible under the Queensland Graduate pathway. Then for master's graduates for 491, again same requirements. You need to have completed all your studies in Queensland in the last 2 years have to have an occupation and be working in Queensland at least 35 hours per week. And then if you're a bachelor's graduate, you need to have completed your whole bachelor's in Queensland again while you're living in Queensland, and you need to have at least 5.5 grade average. So if you fulfill all these requirements, then you can go through the Queensland Graduates pathway towards 190 or 491. And how do we do that? Is first you need to make sure you meet the criteria, then you go and lodge an EOI in the skill select, and then you wait for an invitation, and then you can submit an application, online application for Migration Queensland to say that I am a Queensland graduate and I am going through that pathway, so you get priority that way. And this is the information if you're a graduate who studied in Queensland. Then if you're working in Queensland, so you could be a graduate of anywhere. For example, you graduated from Victoria, you got your subclass 485 and you found a job and moved to Queensland. So this is for you guys. If you want subclass 190, apart from all the other requirements, you need to have 80 points, including the Queensland state points. So 75 points on your own. And also you need to have worked in anywhere in Queensland for last 6 months, full-time basis, and you need to have contract for the next year. So that's for subclass 190. For subclass 491, again same requirements, but you don't need 80 points, you only need 65 points. You need to have worked in Queensland for at least 3 months before you lodge the EOI. So 190, 6 months, but 491 only 3 months. So 190, 6 months, 491 only 3 months. And then again you need to have a full-time job offer for the next year. If you're qualified that, then you can go through Queensland skilled worker living in Queensland pathway for subclass 491. The next category is if you're living offshore. So if you're living offshore, again you are eligible through subclass 190 and subclass 491, but obviously you can't do SBO because for small business owner you need to buy a business and run it for a certain amount of time before you are eligible to apply. But if you're offshore, the requirement is again for subclass 190 you need to have 80 points, but subclass 491 you need to have 65 points. You don't really have to be of course you can't be working if you're offshore, but you don't need a job offer or anything if you're offshore. All you need is that you need to meet the points, you need to have the work experience, and then you apply to Queensland state. This is if you're living away from Australia, and you don't need to have studied in Australia or studied in Queensland to go through this pathway. So you studied in a different country, lived in a different country, worked in a different country, it's still fine as long as you meet the minimum points. You can lodge an expression of interest for Queensland for both 190 and 491. The next pathway is interesting, which is the small business owners operating in regional Queensland. So this pathway, as you know, it's only available under the subclass 491, which is not direct permanent residency. You need to have lived and operated a business in regional Queensland for at least 6 months and employed one full-time employee before we can go ahead and lodge a 491 SBO. When this program first started, many people lodged or got ready for 491 SBO, but over the time the requirements have increased and the difficulty level of being eligible for a 491 SBO have changed, but it's still there. And some of the criterion that has changed is you can't do vendor financing, And you can't do any share transfers or buy businesses from previous SBO owners, or you can't sell your business to a new SBO. And you can't buy a business from family members, and the main applicant has to 100% own the business, and it can't be a home-based businesses or leasing agencies. And if it has to be a pre-existing business, so you can't, if it's a really new business, that you can't buy that off someone, but you can build your own business. But if you're buying it, it has to be a pre-existing business for at least over 12 months. And then applicants must operate this business for at least 3 years once the visa is being granted. Because I think departments found a lot of people, as soon as they get the visa, they sell their businesses. So now they're saying they'll be monitoring in place, and you're expected to run this business for at least 3 years, which is sometimes a bit tricky. So subclass 491 SBO, again a great visa subclass, but then you have to really understand, because you need to spend at least $100,000 to buy this business. And if you're just doing it for the sake of buying a business for this visa subclass, it may not be worth it. But if you're actually a business person who's interested in running a business, I think this would be a great opportunity, because like every other subcategory, you need to have occupation in your nominated, you need to be working in your nominated occupation. But as SBO, you can have a engineering skills assessment, so that's your nominated occupation, but you can run a restaurant, so it doesn't have to match. This was a great benefit for a lot of our clients who actually graduated in accounting and different other businesses, different other sectors, but they couldn't really find a job in their field, so they went and operated a business because they had that background. So it worked out well. So I think that's it for Queensland subclass 190, 491 and SBO. So there are few pathways, one for Queensland Graduate, one for skilled migrant living in Queensland, and one for offshore people, and then small business operators. So the main thing to remember, as I mentioned in the board as well, for subclass 190 you need to have 80 points, and for subclass 491 65 is enough. For subclass 190 you need to have a job 6 months and a future contract for 6 months, permanent full time. Subclass 491 you need to have worked for 3 months and a future contract for a year. As long as you have these requirements, you are eligible for Queensland invitations. And if you're offshore, then you don't need to even have a job offer or worked in Queensland ever. As long as you meet your 80 points or 65 points, you are free to lodge an expression of interest. And funny enough, we recently had a nurse who got an invitation in 75 points, because we kept telling our clients you need to have 80 points, but this lady in health sector, she only had 75 points and she still got her 190 invitation. So I think that's it for Queensland. I will now answer some of the questions that we've got. The first question, actually Mario's written down, because I think we were sent the question before the session. Chetan, chances for a sales representative, medical and pharmaceutical, and score 225412, applying for 494 with 65 points without IELTS, or 65 point without IELTS. 494, I think first of all is the wrong subclass. 494 is the employer nominated. It has to be 491, and if you have 65 points, I don't think I can't see why you can't lodge an invitation. That's all you need, 65 points, and you should be able to lodge an EOI. And most likely you will get invited as well, because that occupation is not an occupation that many people apply. So I think you have a good chance. I've got Sachin asking, I have filed visa under 858 in February after EOI invitation. How much time it will take for assurance of visa? Sachin, 858, once you get the invitation, I think the visa, he's also asking after assurance of PR under 858, do we have to enter the country before any specific timeline, or we can enter anytime in 5 years? No, normally there is a first entry date, It used to be 6 months, but it can be 1 year. So you will, once you get your visa, you will have a first entry date, and you should really come into the country. Don't wait for 5 years, because if you do, then it's going to be really difficult to get a RRV, resident return visa, if you don't come using your visa. But for global 858, by the way, it's global talent. So once you get the invitation for global talent, there is highly unlikely that you're not going to get the visa, as long as you can pass your health and character, and all your documentations given for the invitation is accurate, you will get this visa. I've got Kaushi asking, hi, I'm planning to come for a Master of Teaching at Uni of Wollongong in 2024. Do you think it would be PR pathway? I have Bachelor of Education in English and age is 23. Kaushi, I think that is a really good occupation. There is a demand for teachers, and I can't see that it's going away soon. So I think what you have chosen, it's great. But you will need high English for this course to start with, and also to get your skills assessment at the end. So keep in mind, as long as you can pass the English and work hard, I think this is a great course. If you need our help to secure an offer letter, I'm happy to help you with that. So you can send us an email, admin@cirrus.com.au, and we'll be in touch. This just to mention that Kaushi, your name tells me that you're from Sri Lanka. So for international students, Sri Lanka is level 1, and we do have a separate department that handles education. We have education experts who can help you with getting an offer letter and applying for your visa, or choosing an university, or advising you, what sort of courses would help you depending on your interests. So you guys can call us. We have offices in Sri Lanka, or you can email us. I think Mario will put our email addresses and phone numbers, which is displaying right now as well. I've got Australia Paradise asking, my 190-491 visa is granted from overseas. Congratulations. Or if my 190-491, do I have to come right after the grant? Can I come after 1 to 2 years, as my visa is for 5 years? Can till then my spouse after grant apply for partner visa? If you're a permanent resident of Australia, yes, your partner can apply for partner visa. Nothing stopping you from doing that. But I would recommend, if there is a first entry date, you have to enter the country. And if you're thinking of keeping your permanent residency, you should come and establish some ties in Australia to show that what's the reason that you are either working, or you have family, or you have other ties to Australia. Otherwise, Australian permanent residency, it's a 5-year visa. You can, once you enter the country, you can live in Australia for as long as you want. But if you just come few days after the 5 years, and if you're going back, for you to re-enter into the country, you need another visa that's called RRV, resident return visa. So once you apply for resident return visa, they're going to look at your history. How long have you been in Australia? What have you done in that time? Based on that, they will decide whether they'll give you a RRV or not. So I have had clients where they get their permanent residency, but they never end up coming. But years after, they're trying to come to Australia and they can't. So they obviously have to get a RRV, or a resident return visa. So it's important that you understand what you're doing, and if you get the visa, you actually come and make something out of it. I've got Dilanka Fernando asking, are there any disadvantages if we change courses? What you said about Sri Lanka level 1, can you explain? Okay, sure. So it really depends on the disadvantages, really depends on your personal circumstances. So Dilanka, for example, you're already in Australia, you're studying, and when you applied for your student visa in Australia, your GTE statement, you said some things. But if you really come here and you're struggling and you want to change, it's okay to change, because you're an international student, you can change your mind. But if you can't downgrade your level, if you do that, then you need to apply for a new student visa. So for example, if you're studying a bachelor's, that's level 7 qualification, and if you now decided to do a certificate 3, that's fine. As long as you can get a release, you can change your course. But then as soon as you do that and you get your new COE, you should lodge a new visa. But as long as it's on the same level, you change from one bachelor's to another bachelor's, you're safe. And also, if you're changing your course just before your student visa expires, which means you need a new student visa, then you need to have a really good reason for this change, and showing your background to say that you were struggling, you couldn't really perform well in your previous course, or a good reason why you want to change. Otherwise, when you apply for the new student visa, it's going to be tough. And about Sri Lanka level 1. So for students, international students, every country is categorized from, I think, level 1 to 4. If you're level 1, which means you're on the best level. So level 1 students, if they go to a level 1 school, then you're considered as level 1. Then you don't need to show funds, you don't need to show English for your student visa, which means the risk level of that country is really low. That's why you're level 1. So I'm sure that these levels of countries and levels of colleges, so every country has a level, every college has a level. These levels keep changing all the time. So colleges go through reviews and countries go through reviews, and they change levels. So a Sri Lankan student who's level 1 go to QUT, level 1 university, the visa application is going to be extremely easy, because they think it's a low risk student. This student will continue to study. But a level 2 or 3 or 4 country, I wouldn't mention the country, there are countries like that, goes to a level 3 college. That means the risk level is really high. The department's going to think, oh, okay, this student may not study in this college and keep changing it, or they're using it for different purpose, because that's what the history says about the college and about the country. So that student visa is going to be extremely difficult. You need English, you need financials, you need really good GTE. So that's the, I hope that explains the levels. Okay, Pratik is asking, if company has 1.5 million turnover and 10 staff, is it good enough for 186 nomination? It's regional accounting firm, 1.5 million turnover per year. Yes, that's good enough. So accounting has some caveats. Company has to have at least 5 employees, 1 million turnover, and you have to have an accounting role. It can't be a bookkeeper or general admin role. As long as we can prove that. How do we do that? Is we normally get a organizational chart, and we show it's an accounting firm. It's being an accounting firm is great, because it's very easy to justify that accounting firm needs an accountant. But then again, we use a lot of other documents to prove that this is a genuine position. But what you have told me about this company, I think that it ticks all the boxes. So Pratik, I would love to help you with this throughout the process. If you need any assistance, send us an email. I'll give you a free consultation. We can talk about it more, and then talk to the employer. If they're happy to proceed, then we can go with 186. Keep in mind, as the applicant, you need to have 6 in each band English, and you need to have a skills assessment. Yes, that's great. So if it's an accountant role, that fits perfectly with 10 staff and 1.5 mil turnover. I can't see any issues there. So I'll wait for your email, Pratik. I think, do we have anything on Facebook? No. I think that's it for today. I've answered as many questions as I could, and I've given you my best explanation of Migration Queensland's requirement to get an invitation for Queensland. As you know, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so. There are many changes coming. Changes have come. Chetan saying thank you. You're welcome, Chetan. the announcements out, so we will be seeing many new updates in the next weeks to months. Very excited, keeping our eyes peeled for anything new coming up, and as soon as we hear it, you will be the first to know. So if you haven't subscribed, do so, and stay safe until next week. Next week we are talking about Western Australia, what you have to do to get a nomination from Western Australia. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you next Friday.